In the shadowed halls of crumbling castles and the silent fields of forgotten manors, the collapse of feudal systems unfolded not with the clash of swords, but with the slow unraveling of an ancient order that had defined Europe for centuries. Imagine a world where loyalty was bound by land and blood, where kings, lords, and serfs formed a rigid pyramid of power and obligation. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly eternal structure, forces gathered that would shatter it forever. The feudal system, born from the chaos following the fall of Rome, had provided stability in a dangerous age of invasions and fragmentation. But by the late Middle Ages, its foundations were eroding. No one could foresee how a single bacterium, carried on the backs of fleas, would accelerate its demise, or how the ambitions of rising monarchs would deliver the final blows. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the rhythms of daily existence that masked deeper vulnerabilities. Across the rolling hills and dense forests of 13th century Europe, feudal life pulsed with a harsh but familiar cadence. Serfs rose before dawn in their thatched cottages with dirt floors, the air thick with the smell of smoke from hearth fires and the lowing of livestock. They toiled from sunrise to sunset on narrow strips of land allocated by their lord, plowing with heavy oxen, sowing rye and barley, and harvesting under the watchful eye of the manor overseer. Lords resided in stone keeps, collecting rents in grain, labor, and occasional military service, while the church's bells marked the hours of prayer and feast days offered rare moments of communal relief. Villages were self-contained worlds, bound by custom and obligation. Travel beyond the manor required permission, and survival depended on the lord's protection against bandits or rival nobles. This was a society of mutual dependence, where the peasant's sweat sustained the knight's armor and the noble's feasts. Yet in this routine of back-breaking labor and seasonal cycles, early invisible warning signs stirred. Overpopulation strained the land, soil exhaustion reduced yields, and minor famines hinted at fragility. The system appeared solid, but cracks were forming in the very earth it relied upon. As the 14th century dawned, the feudal order faced pressures that few recognized as existential threats. Trade began to revive along old Roman roads and new river routes, introducing coins and merchants who challenged the barter-based manorial economy. Kings, weary of relying on unruly vassals for armies, started experimenting with taxation and professional soldiers. In England and France, political reforms and long wars tested loyalties. The 100 Years' War drained resources, with knights and peasants alike marching off to distant battlefields, leaving manors understaffed. Meanwhile, the Little Ice Age brought colder, wetter weather, ruining harvests and fostering discontent. Lords tightened controls, demanding more labor or higher rents, while serfs whispered of better opportunities in growing towns. These were not dramatic upheavals, but subtle shifts, the kind that erode confidence slowly, but no one understood what was coming next. The intricate web of feudal vows and land tenure, once a bulwark against anarchy, now felt increasingly burdensome in a world awakening to new possibilities. Tension mounted as economic strains intersected with social unrest. Merchants and emerging urban centers accumulated wealth outside feudal oversight, funding guilds and challenging noble privileges. Peasants, burdened by corvée labor and arbitrary taxes, began to question the divine right of their subjugation. In the countryside, the silence after a poor harvest was broken only by the rustle of empty granaries and the distant toll of funeral bells. Rumors spread of freer lives in cities, where a skilled craftsman could earn wages unbound by a lord's whim. Kings, sensing opportunity, courted urban support to counterbalance powerful barons, yet the nobility clung to tradition, hosting lavish tournaments and hunts that masked their growing irrelevance on the battlefield, where longbows and early firearms diminished the armored knight's supremacy. The air grew heavy with anticipation. Instability simmered like a pot left too long on the fire. Feudal relationships, rooted in personal oaths and land grants, started to fray under the weight of impersonal market forces and royal centralization. Key decisions accelerated the unraveling. Monarchs like those in England and France issued statutes attempting to freeze wages and bind laborers to the land, fearing the loss of control. Lords resisted commutation of services into cash payments, desperate to maintain their authority. But these measures backfired, breeding resentment. The church, once a unifying force, faced criticism for its wealth and worldliness. Pressures from prolonged warfare and climatic shifts compounded the vulnerabilities. In this atmosphere of mounting strain, the feudal pyramid trembled. Vassals questioned their duties to distant kings, and serfs dreamed of autonomy. The system that had organized society for generations now appeared rigid and outdated, ill-suited to a Europe stirring with commerce and ambition. Mistakes born of fear, attempts to reinforce old hierarchies, only hastened the inevitable fracture. Then came the moment the system began to fail, heralded by the Black Death in 1347. Ships from the east docked in Sicilian ports, carrying death in the form of swollen lymph nodes and fevered delirium. The plague swept across Europe with terrifying speed, claiming perhaps a third of the population. Villages emptied overnight, fields lay fallow as reapers succumbed to the sickness. The stench of decay hung over manors where lords and serfs alike perished in agony. In the chaos, traditional bonds dissolved. Survivors fled, abandoning obligations. Labor shortages empowered the living. Peasants demanded higher wages and better terms, defying manorial customs. The feudal economy, dependent on abundant cheap labor, collapsed under the weight of depopulation. By the time the signs became clear, it was already too late. The intricate hierarchy of duty and deference, sustained for centuries, unraveled in the face of nature's indiscriminate wrath. Human consequences followed swiftly, reshaping the social fabric in profound and haunting ways. With fields untended and livestock roaming free, famine stalked the survivors. Peasant revolts erupted, the Jacquerie in France, the Peasants' Revolt in England, where commoners armed with farm tools stormed castles, demanding an end to serfdom. Fear gripped the nobility as they watched their world dissolve. Some lords negotiated with tenants, others resorted to brutal suppression. Families fractured, entire hamlets vanished into overgrown ruins. The psychological toll was immense. Faith in God, king and lord, shattered as the plague struck all classes equally. Silence fell over once bustling manors, broken only by the wind through abandoned halls. Social breakdown manifested in lawlessness, migration to towns, and a newfound assertiveness among the lower orders. The collapse transformed not just economies but human relationships, birthing a generation less willing to accept inherited chains. In the aftermath, long-term historical impacts rippled through centuries. Centralized monarchies rose on the ruins of feudal fragmentation, building bureaucracies, standing armies, and national identities. Kings amassed power through taxation and alliances with merchants, diminishing the autonomy of local lords. The money economy flourished, trade expanded, and the seeds of capitalism took root in the fertile ground left by disrupted manors. Renaissance ideas challenged medieval certainties, while technological shifts in warfare rendered feudal levies obsolete. Europe transitioned from a patchwork of personal loyalties to emerging nation-states, setting the stage for exploration, enlightenment, and modern governance. Yet echoes of feudalism lingered in legal traditions, land ownership patterns, and social hierarchies. The collapse marked an irreversible rupture, propelling civilization toward new forms of organization, even as it left scars of loss and upheaval. As we reflect on this era of profound transformation, the collapse of feudal systems serves as a stark reminder of how seemingly unshakable orders can dissolve under combined pressures of disease, economics, and power shifts. The once vibrant manors now stand as ruins, overgrown with ivy, their stones whispering tales of loyalty, toil, and sudden fragility. In the quiet aftermath, one senses the haunting truth. Societies built on rigid foundations are vulnerable to the winds of change. What rose from the ashes was a different world, more fluid, more centralized, yet fraught with its own tensions. The feudal order did not vanish in a single cataclysm, but faded through human resilience and adaptation, leaving humanity forever altered. In contemplating its fall, we confront the enduring cycles of stability and rupture that define our shared history, urging us to recognize the invisible cracks in our own times before they widen into chasms. The silence that followed the collapse echoes still, a solemn warning across the ages.